Welcome to the I Love Tattooing podcast with your hosts, Jack and Clay, two tattoo artists and shop owners with decades of experience working in street shops where walk-ins are always welcome.
All right, so this episode we are going to discuss apprenticeships and what that used to be, what people think it is, and what it may become. So I think for the purpose of the discussion, we should define some of the things we're going to talk about, particularly an apprenticeship. So I think we should make it clear that when we are talking about an apprenticeship to learn how to tattoo, we are coming from the perspective of working in a walk-in street shop where there's typically a group of people working together. And, you know, while somebody might have one main mentor or instructor, the whole team is probably going to give input and feedback to somebody that's learning in that environment. And we are talking about a structured program with experienced and skilled, competent instructor that has clear expectations and a documented process, and not just some kind of cobbled together, like by the seat of the pants, free labor type, exploitive training that so many people complain about apprenticeships with. Now, Jack, I know that you personally went through a pretty formal apprenticeship and had a contract or some kind of structure. You knew what the expectations were going to be. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your experience with that?
Excuse me. So I apprenticed in 1992 under a guy named Dave Abbey, who had at that point been tattooing almost 20 years. So he was, very traditional tattooer. We had very clear expectations of each other. I paid $10,000 for my apprenticeship, which back then wasn't out of normal. You know what I mean? Not everybody did it, but it was typical to pay a substantial amount for your apprenticeship. I mean, you're getting a fucking career. It was still cheaper than college, right?
Yeah.
So we had some things in writing, because there was a lot of money being exchanged hands. I gave him $5,000 up front, and then I would pay the other $5,000 off over the course of the apprenticeship, which was a year. And, I had things broken down into, when I was going to start making needles or learning about machines or pigments or whatever. Many of these things coincided with when he received a payment, but that makes sense, right?
Yeah. Well, that's reasonable, I think.
Yeah. So there was expectations on me too, that I was going to be there every single day for the hours that the shop was open, plus not just as long as the shop was open, as long as Dave was there tattooing, I was going to be there.
Right. And
this was outside of a military base. So payday weekend, that could mean 4 a.m.
Yeah.
I was to be there an hour before we opened because that's when you cleaned and that's when you made needles. You made needles every day.
Right.
And for those of you that are like, what do you mean made needles? Pre-made needles did exist, but they were very expensive. And so you bought loose needles and you soldered them together, and then in whatever grouping you wanted, liners, shaders, whatever, you soldered that onto a bar, and then you sterilized it, and that's what you used. You made your needles every day, or I did.
Yeah. No, I think I've worked with people that would do that every day. I preferred to spend a whole day making needles, and it would be, 4 to 6 hours of, just breathing solder and flux smoke and burning my fingers and just misery. But I mean, we couldn't order that shit on Amazon, so we did what we had to do.
Well, later in a few years after my apprenticeship, I was working in this really, really, really busy shop, and I didn't want to have to be there an hour early every day. So it would be, if you had downtime, or maybe when you got home that night, you would just make needles until you got a headache from
Yeah.
the flux,
Yeah.
and try and get ahead of the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
That
yeah.
was back in the days when needles were $3 or $4 each plus shipping, right?
Yeah, pre-mades. I was in Pennsylvania and I was tattooing, and I didn't bring enough stuff, and I had to run to National to buy some things, and I paid $15, and it was 3 needles for $15. They were $5 a piece.
Wow.
So yeah, and at this time, like, the average minimum was like $45.
Yeah.
So you're getting $22.50 off a tattoo. You can't afford to be paying $10 for the needles to do it with.
Yeah.
1,000 loose needles were $50.
Yep. Good stuff.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool that you had a structured, formal apprenticeship. I didn't have that. It wasn't even an opportunity for me. Back in the early 90s when I started tattooing, I was in Tallahassee, Florida, in North Florida, and there was no tattoo shops there. So I kind of just ordered some shit from Spalding and figured it out. And
Was tattooing illegal then? There?
yes, yeah. In the city it was. The closest tattoo shop for us was 2.5 hours away in Panama City. We would drive down to Dixieland Tattoos and get tattooed by the legendary Adam West. And actually Tony Olives was down there back then. I met Tony back in the 80s. So I mean, I knew some tattooers and got tattooed in a professional shop, but because I lived 2.5 hours away and had a wife and kids, it was not reasonable for me to move to Panama City and be taught by those guys down there. So I just kind of did it on my own and sort of reverse engineered everything. Fortunately, I was clever enough to figure a lot of that stuff out. I mean, I bought the A to Z tattooing book that Spalding put out that many of us have used for reference in the early days. So that was kind of where I came from. And it wasn't the best situation for me, but it was, I mean, I wanted to tattoo. I knew that I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to have that stuff around me, tattooing, tattooers, all that. So I just made it happen, man, and that's kind of where I came from. But after I was tattooing and kind of teaching myself about that stuff and tattooing the guys from the factory that I worked at and, the local punk rock skinhead dudes around that would let me tattoo them. I started a kind of apprenticeship in a trade. So I did go through an apprenticeship, just not for tattooing. And that ended up helping me tremendously because it helped me later on because I learned about what an apprenticeship is and how the process works for training somebody in a trade type thing. And that's kind of, I feel like what tattooing is. I mean, we're professionals and all that, but you learn this by doing it, right?
Yeah.
And an apprenticeship in the trade that I was in, it was a welding job that I had to go through all these steps, and there was this clear hierarchy of the people and the experience that they had and all that stuff. So later on, I was able to apply that knowledge and kind of develop an apprenticeship program for the company that we work for. But the trade apprenticeship structure exists, and it's kind of across the board. So welders, HVAC men, electricians, they all have this process that they go through, and it's broken down into segments, and you start with the basic stuff and build on that. Once you master that, you move on and so on and so forth until you become a journeyman. And then, you move up through the ranks of that to become a master. And that is really something that the tattoo industry unfortunately lacks. I say that, I mean, it's a blessing and a curse. the 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 industry needs to have a structured and accepted process, but the fact that it's not there means that there's an opportunity for us to fill that void. And I say us as the industry together,
Right.
not like this is not something that I can do by myself, you know.
Yeah.
I think that if we don't do it, that somebody else will. So
Oh yeah, somebody from outside tattooing,
Yeah.
and that's already going. That's already
Oh yeah,
happening.
for sure.
There are tattoo schools all over the country. There's more than you think
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
out there.
Well, there's also tons and tons of people that you know, are apprenticing people to tattoo that aren't qualified. So that's
Right.
another issue, you know. I mean, I think everybody that has been in the industry for a while and views it from the way that you and I do, they all agree that apprenticeship is a way to learn tattooing. I don't
Yeah.
think everybody agrees on the way the apprenticeship should work, and that's the problem.
Well, yeah, that really is the problem. And you know, not being a good tattooer doesn't mean you're going to be a good teacher.
That's
You
for
know,
sure. That's for sure.
and but you know, you could be a mediocre tattooer and a really good teacher. It just kind of depends.
Absolutely.
The two are not closely related. You know, if you have a good understanding of the things that we do, and more importantly, why we do them, and are able to demonstrate or articulate that to somebody,
Yeah.
and you're capable of giving criticism in a way where it's educational,
Yeah.
not insulting, then you're probably going to be a pretty good instructor, teacher, mentor, whatever you want to call it. And there definitely needs to be more people like that. I know that there's this thing in the industry, there shouldn't be any more tattooers. There's too many tattooers. You shouldn't be teaching people. Well, you know, when I learned, everybody was saying there was too many tattooers and too many shops, and there's probably 100 times, 1,000 times as many shops
Easy. Yeah.
now as there was then. I mean, I work in Orlando, which is Orange County, Florida, and the county is who issues the licenses. And there's 1,000 licensed tattoo artists in Orange County. And to get a license, you have to be working in a shop. Now, that doesn't mean all those people are working in a shop. I'm sure a good percentage of them have been fired now. But at some point, you know, that's a lot of people. That's a lot. That's a crazy amount. And not all of them should be teaching people. You know, probably not all of them should be tattooing, but that's not up to me to decide. That's up to the customer to decide. You know, there's not enough good tattooers. There's too many bad tattooers. If you want to say there's too many tattoos, it's the fucking bad ones.
Yes, I agree
with
that.
But education could kind of help with that, you know.
For sure. I think another thing that a structured apprenticeship would really do is build the ethics into it. If
yes,
we have ethical people that are competent, experienced, and capable, that are passing those ethics along, that could solve the problem that we clearly see.
Yeah, the guy that taught me, I mean, definitely had his share of faults, but at the same time, he also taught me some pretty good tattoo ethics. Like, don't ever do somebody's first tattoo on their hand or their neck. You know, don't tattoo. He wouldn't tattoo anybody under 18. But if you're going to tattoo a minor, don't put it somewhere where it's going to keep them from getting a job.
Sure.
And you know, back then that meant it had to be covered by a T-shirt.
Yeah.
And don't, you know, it's probably a bad idea to tattoo drunk people because they don't make the best decisions. And some shit that's common sense that I don't see some other people in the industry doing, you know?
Yeah. No,
but that was important to him, and he taught me about that, you know? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense, you know?
Well, he probably learned some of those lessons the hard way,
Yeah.
or the person that taught him learned those lessons the hard way, and he
Yeah.
was able to pass that on to you. So that's,
Yeah.
you're fortunate. I don't know, I didn't really think about ethics until I started to work with other people that didn't have them. I kind of took it for granted, Um, sometimes, sometimes we suffer from perception bias, is what I call it, where you
Mhm.
assume that other people are operating the same way you are until you
Yeah.
find out almost inevitably in a very painful way that that's not the case. But I think ethics is something that is not being addressed in apprenticeships on a large enough scale to solve these problems at this point.
Yeah.
Um, I think one of the reasons that things are the way they are now is because so many people are in the business, so many different kinds of people, right?
Mhm.
So it used to be back in the 90s when you and I got into this, that tattooed people were common and similar in many, many ways. And when you
Mhm.
would see somebody who was tattooed, you instantly had a connection with them.
Right.
And
Well, part of that is because there were less of us, much
right,
less.
it was much more unique and
Mhm.
uncommon. So, you if you had visible tattoos, you had this instant bond with other people that also had that.
Yeah.
Um, and the industry's changed since then, and that's, I'm not commenting on whether that's good or bad. It just is what it is, and we
Yeah.
have to deal with it. There's some good changes and bad changes that have occurred,
Yeah.
uh, but I think, there's room to improve for sure. That
Sure.
back in the 90s when I first started tattooing in a tattoo shop, that would have been 95-ish. Um, there was no regulations in Florida, like literally none. There was a law that said you can't tattoo unless you're under, I think it said the general supervision of a physician, and
Yeah.
that was it.
Yeah.
None of that shit was defined. Nobody understood what that meant, and that actually created a barrier to entry to people because there wasn't a clear path, right?
Right.
If you wanted to be a tattooer back then in Florida, and that's what I know about because that's where I tattooed. The only way you could do it was to figure that shit out and make mistakes and go in there and challenge the health department or whoever to get the business license and all these things. But
Mhm.
none of it was clear.
Right.
So that kept people out that weren't those kind of people.
Mhm.
So it was a lot of people who were motivated, who were problem solvers, who thought outside the box, who wouldn't take no for an answer and things like that.
Right.
Now, um, now after going through COVID, you can see how many people just followed the instructions they were given and didn't question anything.
Yeah.
We both saw that, across the whole world, really. I mean,
Yeah.
tattooers everywhere had all kinds of problems with that, and some of us didn't stand for it. So
Yeah.
it is what
Well, a
it is.
lot of us back then, I got tattooed because it was fucking cool, and it
Yeah.
was cool because it was a subculture. It was antisocial,
Yes.
and if you saw somebody, that was heavily tattooed, and you were heavily tattooed, like you said, like you had at least on some level, some kind of shared ideology with that person.
Yeah.
It was, like outside, you were outside the norm of society,
It was
and
outlaw shit.
yeah, fuck yeah. And typically, like, you went to a tattoo shop, the type of people that were tattooing, I mean, sure, there was a lot of like art students and shit like that, but they weren't the kind of art students that were like hanging outside of a gallery with an easel. They were like fucking punk guys and
Yeah.
bikers and shit like that. They were fucking badass.
Graffiti writers and people that broke the rules, right?
Yes. And or girls. I was fortunate enough to tattoo in a town that embraced subcultures, and was a really, really big town for art and music. So in the early 90s and stuff, there were women. And
Yeah.
actually, at one time, our shop, we were very, very huge, busy street shop. Okay. There was like, I don't fucking 8 or 9 stations in there, right?
Wow.
If you went there on the weekend, there would be 2 female tattooers, 2 female piercers, and then the piercers had a receptionist that was a female, and the tattoo artist had a receptionist that was female. 6 girls working in that shop. And after there, it was years before I worked with women again, because not everywhere in America is like that.
Yeah.
And I hear a lot about how women were kept out of tattooing, and that in some instances probably happened, but a lot of people were kept out of tattooing. You know what I mean?
For sure.
But at the same time, it wasn't something that attracted a lot of people like it does now. You know,
Yeah.
There weren't male nurses back then either. You know,
Yeah.
So are you telling me that men were kept out of nursing? You know, just like women are kept out of being bricklayers. I'm sure it happened. I'm not saying it didn't, but it wasn't like an industry. We didn't all meet together one night and go, let's keep the bitches out of this, you know? At least they didn't invite me to that meeting.
Yeah. I'm not aware of anything like that.
Maybe I shouldn't call them bitches.
Well, back in the 90s, though, there were a lot fewer tattooers, a lot fewer tattoo shops. And that kind of small community resulted in a lot more cohesion, because people had a lot more similar backgrounds, similar experiences, and things like that. So there was less of this disconnect from ethics and from, the kind of problems that I hear a lot of people complain about today. But at the same time, if you look at tattooing from the 90s versus now, 30 years at least of change, the tattoos that are happening now, we would have shit our pants if we saw that back in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the innovation, you got to be kidding me. So there's been just absolutely tremendous improvements in tattooing that we've all benefited from. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
You know,
one thing we really benefited from, and, I hadn't really thought about it until just us talking about it now, was the fact that we did have some kind of common interest. If you met somebody else that was heavily tattooed or a tattooer, whereas the generation of my mentor, tattooing was so taboo. Those guys, a lot of them remained isolated.
Yeah.
My mentor didn't associate with anybody from the industry. He had nothing to do with any other tattooer, and quite frankly despised everybody. There was one person that Dave had respect for, and that was an old timer named Leon Miller. And there was a mutual respect because Leon had tried to run Dave out of business, and Dave made it.
Nice.
But I never heard him say anything good about anybody else. So, what that meant was Dave was still using acetate stencils, 70s.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy that he was so isolated like that, and he was still doing things from 20 years before that time.
Oh yeah.
That I can't even imagine that. And that's clearly before the internet and things like that. Because that really changed things a lot too.
Yeah. Just the big change back then was not as big as the internet, but was tattoo magazines.
Yeah.
Because then anybody could go to a bookstore and see these magazines and look at these tattoos. And that's how you saw what other guys were doing. And there were some guys, Marcus Pacheco and like Eddie Deutsch and stuff like that. Those guys were doing shit that just blew me away, Yeah. Paul Booth was huge then. You couldn't pick up a magazine without his stuff. That was a big deal. That was the beginning of networking.
Yes, in tattooing for sure.
And besides writing letters.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I remember reading a lot of those articles in those magazines, and that was the first time I was exposed to a lot of those guys, and hearing the stories and the tales that they had to tell through whoever was writing those articles. So that was very, very influential for me. And I thought it was amazing. I think after magazines, once the internet was a thing, and this is before, Instagram and Facebook and MySpace even, or whatever was even before that. I don't even know. But there was
Yeah.
like bulletin boards and forums. There was like the Reed
Mhm.
Street Forum and stuff like that. And that
Oh
was
yeah, I
really,
remember that.
that was really the first time tattooers could network in real time, right? Like you could get on your computer and like chat with somebody in another state or another country and talk to them about what you were doing and how things worked and what tricks and tips you had, and they would share that shit with you.
Yeah.
And man, they guarded that shit like crazy. Like you could be a tattooer, right? And they still wouldn't let you in there.
Yeah.
Like they were super, super protective of all that information. And man, what a change that is.
Well, yeah, because there
from
was a lot of good information there.
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
for sure. But they were not like
Yeah.
friendly about it, You really had to know somebody
Yeah.
to get in there.
Yeah, I had some expectations with tattooing because my dad has tattoos. My dad's good friend, who is now my father-in-law, he was a tattooer in Denver back then in the 80s, and it was just the coolest thing in the world. So I wanted to do tattoos because I had actually met a real life tattooer and he was fucking cool. So, you know what I mean?
He still is cool, man. What are you talking about?
Yeah, of course. But Susie Gann that I work with, she was a woman that tattooed, started in the mid 90s. Well, she still is a woman, but she tattoos with me, and I heard her telling one of the other people, she was like, when she was a little kid, nobody said, I'm going to grow up and be a tattooer unless you were like Jack. So unless you knew something, that wasn't your life goal. And for me, I was like, fuck yeah. But I never thought that goal was attainable because he had made it very clear he wouldn't teach me. So I joined the Army to pay for art school to go, and I was going to go into fucking advertising, and found tattooing. I went to tattoo shops, was like, I'm going to learn this. And my mentor had to teach me or ban me from the fucking shop because I ingratiated myself. I made myself useful. I was doing drawings for him. I was getting his lunch, just whatever, and I would ask him and he'd tell me no. And I just wouldn't go away and I would stick with it. And finally, I was in. And I don't see that kind of thing from young people now. They call, hey, do you guys need an apprentice? And I'm always no. And then that's it. I never hear from them again.
Yeah, because they called one of the 30 other shops in your zip code.
Yeah. Yeah.
The barrier to entry into tattooing is non-existent anymore.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Gatekeeping is what it's called now, but now it's a bad thing. Keeping people that don't belong out.
I don't even think it's gatekeeping. I think it was just, it was like, we didn't want just anybody coming in there. The right people had to prove themselves to get in. So let's see, where are we at here? We've talked about the bulletin boards from the 90s.
I forgot about that. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, no, that was a big, huge thing, man. And that really pushed tattooing as far as like advancing in the skill and technique of tattooing at that time. It was the first real push that I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Then Tattoo Gun magazine and Tattoo Artist magazine came out.
Wasn't it called Machine Gun?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Machine Gun. Yep. Yeah. And they had articles about like how machines worked and how like the technical aspects of like how the needle puts pigment in the skin and all that stuff. A lot of really good information in there. And there was a lot of bullshit too. Like people just filler, just nonsense, whatever. But that was some good stuff. And that I think, helped a lot of people improve pretty quickly.
The 90s also, something that really helped was there were some really good informative books out there.
Yeah.
Like way better than Tattooing A to Z. And there's a lot of good information in
Oh,
that.
there is, for sure.
People love to hate on it, but I mean, that's part of our past. We came from that. You know what I mean? But like Guy Aitchison.
Yeah. Reinventing the
tattoo. The Godoy brothers, Tattoo Machines and Their Secrets. That was the first tattoo machine book I ever saw. But tattoo conventions really kind of picked up. There became more tattoo conventions. Instead of there being one in this country a year, there was a few. And those conventions, you had these artists that were just blowing the doors off of fucking tattooing. These people that were incredibly artists doing seminars, talking about different techniques and I would go to everything. I went to pigment mixing seminars, anything like drawing or whatever, anything that, as long as it wasn't about doing fucking portraits, because I ain't into that. God bless the people that can do it, but that ain't for me. And that was a big deal, Plus you got to network with other tattooers, and you'd tell somebody some crazy story and they'd be like, oh yeah, that happened. And you're like, fuck, I'm not the only one.
Yeah. That kind of shared experience. And like when you talk to somebody that you just met and you have the same experience, then you become instant friends, That's pretty cool.
Dude, I would meet tattooers at a convention. I met this dude from Switzerland. Doc Blues. Dude was super cool. And like, even there, like total, like same experiences. So he was dealing with the same shit,
Well, I mean, that was the era when tattooers were the same kind of people, more or less. And people that got tattooed were the same kind of people. Right. So, it's not like today where, it's on TV and, it's just everywhere. I mean, every ad you see everywhere has got people with tattoos, and like I think it's great, but it's not the same as it was back then, man. Not at all.
No. Yeah, you would have never seen tattooed people in an ad unless it was like a fucking Crime Stoppers commercial.
Right? Yeah, wanted poster.
Right.
Well, I think there was those forums and magazines and books and things. And that kind of has led us to where we are today, where you can get a 1-minute lesson on tattooing on Instagram, or you can watch a 15-minute video on any technique you want, any machine, any needle configuration, anything like that. You can just all that information is just right there for free on every different platform, whatever you want. It's all there for the taking now.
YouTube University.
Yeah, so crazy. I mean, you can learn shit from that for sure. But you can't learn how to be a tattooer from that. You can learn some techniques, you can learn some tricks and some tips and things like that. But you can only learn to be a tattooer from a tattooer and doing tattoos.
Right. Yeah. It's doing it under the supervision of somebody that knows what they're doing. Hundreds of thousands of people probably were bored during COVID and bought a cheap kit off of Amazon. And started tattooing their friends. And, that probably worked out for a couple people for sure. But for the majority, probably not,
Yeah.
But the thing is you don't even know what you don't know. So I've seen some shit on YouTube. I saw a guy was going to teach people how to build the machines, and he wouldn't even call them the parts by the right fucking names. I mean,
there's nobody to correct him, man.
Sure, and comments for some reason were turned off.
I wonder why.
But that shit's out there. There's a lot of people, because they think it's funny, purposely putting the wrong information out.
That's nothing new. Come on, you've probably experienced that or been a part of that yourself. Telling some punk kid that wants to tattoo, and you tell them to go get the pigment at Sears or whatever.
Yes, and that's something that we really literally did, and it wasn't just like something I learned from somebody I worked with. Like I've heard other tattooers say that. It's I've heard different departments of Sears though. We used to tell them to go to the back by where they do layaway, the customer service area, and at first they're going to tell you no because they don't want to sell to just anybody. But be persistent. Show them.
That's how they know you're real.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I guess we've gone from learning from firsthand to magazines, tattoo conventions, books, online forums, then now video lessons, and now we have reached the epic and era of the dreaded tattoo school. And man, these fucking things are everywhere.
Yeah. And I want to say something real quick. Forums, books, seminars at conventions. As far as I know, nobody ever thought that was a substitute for an apprenticeship.
No.
We just thought that was some extra knowledge, a little bit more of the fucking magic is what we were getting from that.
Yeah.
But now people see YouTube as a substitute for an apprenticeship.
Yeah. So in every other profession that has that kind of stuff, they call it ongoing education, right?
Right.
There's new information that comes out and people want to know about it.
Yeah.
Whether you're medical or maybe you're a barber or a hair salon person, whatever, like there's new shit coming out, new techniques, whatever. And you want to learn about that shit.
Yeah.
That's not a substitution, just like you said, for an apprenticeship and learning things the right way. So that, I mean, it's a shame that people don't understand that.
Yeah.
And they get taken advantage of. This is another problem that we have, right? That all this shit's happening. Well, it's kind of our fault, man, because we didn't offer a substitute for that. We didn't say, this is the right way to do it. This is how you do this, right? So people are just like, what do I do? I don't know. I'm going to go get a YouTube video or go to a seminar or buy a book or whatever. And then I'll just know how to tattoo. Like, they weren't told, like, this is how you do it. This is the way to do it. That's why they're going to schools, because they don't know any better. They want to learn how to tattoo. And that's the easiest, most accessible way for them to get into the business in their mind. Right.
Right. And for some of them, that's the only way to get into the business, because just because, your mom put your drawings on the refrigerator and somebody said you were a good drawer does not mean you are a good drawer. Okay.
Well, okay. So let's say this. You are a good drawer. That doesn't mean you're going to be a good tattooer.
No, it does not.
No connection there. I mean, no, there is. I'll take that back. Being a good artist will definitely make you a better tattooer, but it's not a guarantee that you will be successful in tattooing.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that.
Yeah. I've known plenty of artists that did not draw well, but could trace really well. And could combine elements from other drawings into a solid tattoo. They were definitely limited by their lack of artistic ability, but it didn't slow them down from as long as they stayed in their lane, very successful tattooers.
And how many people have you seen that were phenomenal artists in one medium or another that couldn't make it in tattooing?
No.
I mean, it's more than art. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just being a good artist doesn't mean you can be a good tattooer.
And there are very few art styles that require you to be able to, in one pass, put your pencil down and make a nice, long, clean line without going back in. That's something kind of unique. Maybe doing pen and ink illustration, but that's something that's unique to tattoos. And not really any other medium translates. Like if you know how to do acrylics, it's not going to take you real long to figure out oil paints. Right. Not that they're the same thing, but you know what I mean? Like, a lot of
there's a overlap there.
Right. But being able to be great at oil paint isn't going to do anything for tattooing. You'll understand, composition and color and some basic art, things like that. But it's not going to make you a good tattooer, It
won't.
But that's a fucking problem with these tattoo schools. It doesn't matter your artistic ability. They're taking any single person that can come up with the money to get in. They don't care. Nobody is turned away. And, like I said, we don't need any more bad tattooers. Yeah, right. Ethics. It's just a fucking cash machine for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how people from outside the industry see tattooing. We're here because we fucking love it.
Yeah.
But people from outside the industry, it's like there's a lot of money in tattooing. Look at these fucking supply companies, man.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know,
It's I mean, tattooing is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry.
Yes.
In all aspects of it.
Yeah.
And it's only a matter of time till somebody realizes that
Mhm.
they can get a piece of that, and they're gonna get in there and do it. I mean, it's already happening, right?
Yeah. You know, the fact that tattooing is such a big business has really allowed for tremendous amount of innovation, especially in like power supplies.
Yeah.
We now have rechargeable battery operated tattoo machines, the advancements in tattoo machines and cartridges and all of that stuff. That's because there's money to be made here. And because, you know, a lot of tattooers are fucking innovative. You know, you had to be to get into this years ago. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you and I both know that there was a barrier to entry, was no clear path.
Yeah.
You know, you had to be persistent. You had to figure it out on your own, you know, those things.
Yeah.
So let's move on here. I think another problem that we have with the apprenticeships in tattooing is, what does it take to teach somebody tattooing? What does it take to teach somebody anything? Right. I mean, being an educator is a specialized skill, just like being a tattooer is a specialized skill, just like being an artist is a specialized skill.
Right.
So those things don't necessarily connect to each other. Now, the best tattoo instructor is probably going to be a well-rounded, like well-experienced, competent tattooer who can also draw. Like it's going to work in that direction. But being able to draw is not going to make you a good tattooer, and being a good tattooer is not going to make you a good mentor or instructor for tattooing. So I think that's something that people don't realize. There's tons and tons and tons of people out there who are teaching people to tattoo that don't know how to tattoo, that don't have the skills to teach somebody how to tattoo. That I mean, they're just doing it because they want an apprentice, or they want to have an employee or somebody to get coffee for them or whatever. And
they want a sycophant. That's what they want.
You're right.
Somebody to feed their ego.
Somebody to give them likes on social media, right? So there, you know, there's all kinds of, I think, qualifications that somebody needs to have to teach somebody how to tattoo. They need to have experience. They need to have the right personality. They need to have patience. They need to be able to critique things in a constructive way, like you said before. They need to have good communication skills. I mean, there's so many different things that it takes to teach somebody how to tattoo.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you just got some idiot that's cleaning your floor and answering the phone for you. Like, that's not an apprentice, dude. That's a shop helper.
Yeah. And you know, another really important thing is to be able to have some self-control and not lose your shit. Because at some point, your apprentice is going to want to make you squeeze the life out of them. But you can't do that.
Yes.
It's not real helpful.
Self-discipline is definitely
I saw one of the guys at the shop one time take an apprentice outside and just fucking scream at him. And I was like, this is not the fucking way to do it. And the apprentice came back inside and sat down and went back to, he was tattooing a fucking grapefruit or something. You know what I mean? And all the mistakes he was making, he wasn't making anymore. And I was like, dude, you probably shouldn't like yell at people. He's like, it worked. He's like, that's the only way I could get through to this motherfucker.
Yeah, like, I agree with that. I think that there are some people that respond to that, right?
Yeah. Because if you're nice about it, you can laugh it off. Oh, that's funny, you know. But
there's some people that you need to talk to that way, and you
yes,
so
of course,
those are communication skills that
that
you know need to be people need to be aware of.
Yeah, and being able to understand which one is your apprentice. Is your apprentice somebody that needs to be coddled a little bit and talked nicely to, or is it somebody that you got to fucking threaten with murder?
Tender or tough, which is it?
and that's a skill that not a lot of people possess, you know. There's
Yeah,
nowhere
that
in which you
awareness.
can go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
for sure. But we had talked about this before, and I don't think that bullying. We've all heard horror stories about people
Yeah.
being abused and bullied, and I mean, like I saw an apprentice get lit up with an airsoft gun, shit like that. That's I know a girl that was a piercing apprentice. They locked her in a fucking closet for however long, and then they told her that if she didn't leave the shop crying every day, that it wasn't a good apprenticeship. Like that's
Was that
not
at a shop you worked at?
no, she apprenticed somewhere
okay.
else and then
I
came
see.
to work for us.
Okay.
But I would have never stood for that, even if I wasn't, if I the shop owner or whatever. But we've all heard those stories, and that's awful. That's not going to be real conducive to learning.
No, that's just abuse. That's
Yeah.
just people with low self-esteem that have
Yeah.
to, pick on somebody to make themselves feel better. Now, I think that there's almost inevitably going to be a certain amount of hazing when a new person comes into a group, right?
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's an apprentice or new artist or whatever, people kind of want to know how people react to things, what their sensibilities are, what their limits are.
Mm-hmm.
So people tease and joke and do things like that.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like a getting to know you thing, I think.
Right. Yeah.
I've experienced it in various jobs and things like that, and if you tolerate a bunch of crap and abuse, and people are going to continue to do that. But if you stick up for yourself and say, hey, stop, sort of like the stories of people going to prison, go into prison and get in a fight with the biggest dude you can find. And then everybody's like, I'm not messing with that guy. He ain't scared to fight him. So that kind of thing, you got to stick up for yourself.
Yeah. However, during your apprenticeship, don't try and fight anybody.
No.
That
That's
works
an analogy.
Yeah. One guy I know, during his apprenticeship early on, they were like, all right, you're going to the bar with us. So all the tattoo guys took the apprentice to the bar, you know what I mean?
Of course.
And they made the apprentice get up, who cannot sing. They made him get up on stage and sing karaoke.
Yeah. As uncomfortable as that probably was for that guy, it probably helped him in the long run. And I've done
out of his shell.
What's that?
Came out of his shell.
Exactly. Because part of tattooing is putting on a show for people. Now, you're maybe not going to be a vocalist. You're not, Frank Sinatra or something like that. But, you need to engage with people and talk to people and make them feel comfortable and excited about what's happening, and make them know that you are the right person to provide the tattoo for them. And that's all like sales and acting and shit like that. Like that is an important thing that people need to learn how to do. And that's something that I always teach people when I'm teaching them to tattoo, is like engage with people. You see somebody come in and some lady's got some like crazy fingernails, like compliment her fingernails, get her talking about that, get engaged with her and all that. And you just have this conversation, and that leads on to doing a tattoo,
Yeah, if you go to any walk-in shop, the guys that are, or gals, when I say guys, I mean people in general.
Yeah. The team.
But the people at that shop that make the most money are the ones that are outgoing and hustle. They're greeting the customers, and they act like they're happy to see the customer. You should be happy to see the customer because it might give you some money.
Yeah.
And those are the people, the introverts that just sit in the back, kind of mope around. They're probably not seeing as much income as the guys that are outgoing, and when we talked about, this before, the bullying, you brought up a really good point that a lot of people will perceive being held accountable as being bullied.
Yeah. Well, I think that accountability is a big problem. Number one, people, like you said, don't understand when they're being held accountable that's not a punishment. That's an opportunity for you to improve yourself and grow, right? And then there's a big problem with the lack of accountability for people that are taking on apprentices that don't need to be, that aren't qualified and things like that. So, that's sort of a two-way thing. Like, I think the apprentice needs to hold their instructor, their mentor accountable to provide them with the correct training and transparency in the process and all these things. And if that makes the person uncomfortable, maybe they're not the right person to be teaching somebody to tattoo.
Yeah, you're not doing your apprentice any favors by not holding them accountable.
Yeah.
You're actually, you're not helping them at all.
No. And, we don't want to be abusive, but if somebody mistakes being held accountable for abuse, they got bigger problems,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a different issue that you can't probably solve,
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's probably been any number of people that you've talked to that have gone through some kind of an apprenticeship that was a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
That was just a nightmare. They didn't learn anything. They were abused, all these things.
Taken advantage of.
Exactly. Exploited, whatever, free labor, or unwanted sexual advances, things like that. I mean, I've heard all kinds of fucked up stories like that.
Yep.
And those things never get mentioned when people complain about schools, right? Like the schools, they're not doing things the way that it should be done, because you can't teach somebody to tattoo in like 6 weeks and all this. But how many problems are there with the apprenticeships that are out there?
Yeah.
Probably as many or more than these schools. This is not just a problem with schools that are ripping people off. I mean, that's certainly a problem.
Yeah.
But we need to take a look at the apprenticeships out there that aren't teaching anybody, that are abusing people and taking advantage of people, because they're just as bad, if not worse, than the schools, because these people are posing as credible people from our industry. And this idea that only people from the tattoo industry can be acceptable in providing goods and services to the tattoo industry. I don't really buy that, because there's a lot of shitty people in the industry that are taking advantage of people. And I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
I know plenty of people that aren't tattooers that make products for tattooing that are good products,
Yeah.
So I think there's exceptions.
I've taught several people that have tried to do an apprenticeship somewhere else and not be taught shit or whatever, and get abused, get taken advantage of, charged $1,000 for a tattoo kit that was $25 on Amazon. And it's usually a person that just wants a slave and a sycophant. And, they have a real bad taste in their mouth. And fortunately, they're still trying to be tattooers. And, they come to me and or someone else that can teach them and put them on the right path, And so I think maybe a hybrid model, like in the building trades, because you'd mentioned building trades earlier, where you can learn the technical aspect of it in a classroom setting, but then you have to learn the rest on the job.
Yeah. Well,
working with a mentor.
Yeah. I think with technology, that's inevitable at this point. I don't think that the traditional kind of apprenticeship that you went through that was completely mentored in person and live it's not even practical now, right?
Yeah.
The use of technology to train people on things that is possible is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
But you cannot teach somebody to tattoo through videos or a school setting that is a 6-week thing. I think some kind of hybrid, like you said, with a school classroom type, I don't know, video technology portion combined with working in a tattoo shop with somebody that knows what they're doing. If you look at how a doctor learns, they go to medical school after they get their bachelor's degree for 2 to 4 years, depending on the kind of specialization that they do. And then they do an internship for 1 to 2 years. That's an apprenticeship, dude.
Yeah.
Doctors do an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
After they go to college.
Yeah. Which is way more brutal than anything any tattooer will ever go through.
Yeah. These guys walk around with a journal, and everything they see, they're writing down, taking notes, talking to other doctors that are there, talking to nurses, people that have seen these crazy illnesses or injuries or whatever it is that they're doing
Mhm.
for decades, and learning about all this stuff. I mean, it's heavy, but the point is they do an apprenticeship even with the
Yeah.
school.
So, we kind of said earlier that if the tattoo industry doesn't do it, somebody else will, and that's already starting to happen.
Yeah.
But Oregon requires people to go to a tattoo school.
Yeah.
A friend of mine that works there, he calls them state-sponsored scratchers,
Yeah,
and that's because, like, they all knew that law was coming, and nobody did anything.
Oh, they probably did. They
Well, they
probably
probably
told
tried.
it. Yeah, they probably told everybody, you better not do anything.
And so now they have these other companies that are teaching tattooers, and other states will look at that and they'll be like, oh yeah, this model's working. Plus, look at all this revenue we get off of whatever licensing fees and bullshit
Yes.
we're charging the schools.
Well, I don't even think the government looks at it as revenue. I think they look at it as, hey, we can expand our division if we add this sector to it. We can
Right.
hire more people. We can increase our budget. We can have more control over this stuff. So the government, just like anything else, is a self-serving entity that wants to grow and expand, and that's what they're going to do. That's their goal. And if they can do that by regulating the tattoo industry, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
They're doing it obviously in some places.
Yeah.
I know that here in Florida, 2012, they had the tattoo artist licensing program that we were suddenly subject to after however long we worked here with no regulation. And it was if you remember that was a heavy thing. We were like, what the fuck are we going to do? Who the fuck is going to teach this stuff? Like they're going to bring in some people and tell us, you got to do this. So being the problem solvers that we are, we decided to take it upon ourselves to become instructors for that, so that we could control the information that we were giving to our people and our staff. And we could also understand what it was that the government wanted from us as artists and tattoo shop owners. And so, we got involved with that, and I'm glad that we did, because it was a great learning experience. We built a really solid relationship with the health department on the state and local level.
And I want to clarify something. When you said we got involved with that, we created the class.
Yes.
We didn't just get involved. We created the actual class.
Yes, we did.
We did all the research, wrote it out, made the class.
Yeah. We created the educational course for bloodborne pathogen in the state of Florida for tattoo certification. We created the curriculum, submitted it to a doctor. It was returned back to us probably 4 or 5 times for updates and things like that. And I personally had a friend who was in the medical industry that I had examined it. I'm sure you shared it with people that you thought would give you good feedback. I mean, this was a process that took us probably over a year to create and do. And, we made it from scratch. Like nobody gave us anything. We were just like, what do we do? I don't know. We'll just create it. Let's do it. So that was I think a cool thing that we got to go through together. And now it's certainly been beneficial for us to really understand what the government wants, and be able to, teach people about safe tattooing and stuff like that.
Yeah. And other tattooers could do the same thing for apprenticeships. I'm certainly not saying that I want schools and I love schools, but maybe if we had something that more of us could agree on and I don't want to tell anybody how to teach or how to train their people, but there are some universal things in tattooing, that not everybody is learning, some things that are overlooked or whatever. And, we could come up with that and kind of, and self-regulate like other industries do. Like you told me that scuba diving is how that's regulated.
Yeah. So,
not regulated.
Well, it is regulated, but not by the government. So, scuba diving is infinitely more dangerous than tattooing. more people die scuba diving than getting tattoos. So,
Mhm.
um, it's a dangerous activity. There is no government license for scuba diving. Now, I hope the government doesn't see this and decide they need to get involved, because there's a few organizations out there that provide training and certification for scuba diving, and they are private, non-government companies that do this. And you go through a class, you get certified, you do a dive, you're with an instructor, you go through this stuff, and then you get your card, and now you can go dive, and you keep a logbook of how many dives you've done and all this, so you can move up to the next level of diver. They have like open water is the basic, and then it goes up to like technical, night diving, underwater navigation. There's all different things you can do with scuba certification, but the government has no control over it whatsoever. And I would like to see the tattoo industry do something like that, where
Mhm.
we create that and we do it ourselves. And there could be multiple tattoo certifications. You
Yeah.
know, it doesn't have to be just one thing, this
Mhm.
monolith that just controls tattooing. It can be, the Eastern school, and then the California, I don't know, whatever. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
can have
Yeah.
their own shit and make it all up, but there are things that, just like scuba diving, are fundamental, right? There's
Yeah.
certain things that you have to do to do tattoos. And I think most people in the industry that have been in it for a while, that have
Mhm.
this, similar background, agree that ethics is important, and the history is important to preserve the culture of tattooing. I mean, let's face it, we do this because we love it, right?
Right.
And in doing it, we love it more, and the more we do, the more we love it. I
Yeah.
feel like,
Mhm.
I'm learning new things about tattooing all the time, and
Right.
it's fascinating, and I still feel the magic in it.
Oh yeah.
And there's no reason that we can't take control of this. The lack of any kind of standardization in apprenticeships in the industry is an opportunity for us, I think.
Right. For sure.
Um, and I don't mean us, like you and I mean all of us
Yeah.
tattooers,
Yeah. Yeah.
people that care about this, that love tattooing. We have the opportunity to take control of it and keep it real and keep it cool and keep it magic, because if we don't, somebody else is going to. I mean, so many people are involved in it now that
Mhm.
it's different than it was, and it's good in some ways and not as good in others. And that's a
Right.
matter of opinion. It's a subjective
Mhm.
thing. But I think collectively we could agree on some fundamentals and a basic process, and then go
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah. To stay in tattooing long term, you know,
Yeah.
for us
Yes.
over 30 years, you
Yeah.
have to love it,
Yeah.
because if you don't, the few bad customers you
You
get,
just hate it.
the hours, it'll just wear you the fuck down.
Yeah.
And we've all met that tattooer that is a good tattooer but a miserable fuck because they hate
Yeah.
it, but they ain't got nothing else going for
Right.
them. Can't
Right.
do anything else, and
Yeah.
that's sad. I don't want to see anybody like that.
I
So
agree.
yeah, you're right. I think the majority of us that are in here in it long term do love it, and yeah, this thing of ours is special.
It is. I want to keep it that way.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and getting young people in that are excited about it,
Yes.
and educating them the right way about the process, the history, ethics,
The
the
culture. Yeah.
culture of tattooing. Tattooing is one of those few careers that for me, being a tattooer is one of the many things that defines me. An
Yeah.
accountant isn't going to fucking tell you that. You know what I mean? Like, uh,
Yeah. They're not like, hey, how you doing? I'm an accountant.
right. You know what I mean? But tattooing is like that.
Yeah.
There's a lifestyle and a culture to it, and
We literally wear it on our sleeve 24 hours a day, man.
yeah,
The uniform
sure.
we can't take off.
Yeah. But bringing new people in will help it evolve and advance,
Oh yeah.
especially if they're educated and like that.
Yes. Yeah. We need to preserve the integrity of tattooing, and that's going to
Yeah.
best be done with ethics and with culture and with history and all the things that we love about tattoo and that we want to share with the next generation and
Yeah.
beyond.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a problem that can be solved. And I think that the people that do love tattooing understand that love is a powerful motivator, and it can really make big changes.
Yeah.
And I think that a majority of the people in the business are people that love tattooing and people that care about tattooing and want to protect it.
Yeah.
But the threat really hasn't reared its head to the point that everybody's like on guard for it. Now
Right.
it's just like people grumbling about it, like, this isn't cool. This isn't going a direction that I like. Well, let's change that.
Yeah,
Let's do something
sure.
about it.
Okay.
Let's figure this fucking problem out.
Yeah, man. That's the way to do it.
Tattooing is going to continue to evolve, right? I mean,
For sure.
it's alive. It's a
Yeah.
living thing, like a language, and
Yeah.
new words are going to be put into it, and words are going to have different meanings and all this stuff. But tattooing can evolve, and we can kind of direct that, I think. And I think I don't know how it's going to happen, but we can't even get people to agree on aftercare, right?
Yeah. And the customers are also the driving force behind how things involve. I mean, in any industry, the market demand, the customers are who's running the show. And,
well, part of the market demand in tattooing is new people coming into it and wanting to learn how to tattoo. And I guarantee you they want to do the right thing. Now, there's a portion of them that want a shortcut and a magic bullet and all this, and that shit doesn't exist. There's no way, unless you're a complete freak that just happens to pick up on it faster than anybody in the history of tattooing. It takes your whole life to really master tattooing. And there's every time you do a tattoo, it's a different experience. Every customer's different. Every person's skin is different. Every day is different. And that's one of the things I love about tattooing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Thing every day,
Yeah. Yeah. It totally is. So, well, I think that kind of sums it all up.
Yeah. We just got to figure out how to make this happen. I don't know how though. maybe there's a smart person watching this that can give us some advice. And I would love to hear some feedback from people that have kind of thought about this problem and maybe have some insight that we don't.
Yeah. I hope it's not just us that are thinking about the future of tattoo education, because that's important,
It's not just us. Now we might be thinking about it differently than other people, and that's fine.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But everybody, I think, thinks about it on some level, whether they understand it or not. Whether it's some guy that's been tattooing for 10 years that gets a new person in there and it's like, why do you do it like that? Well, that's how I was taught. Like, who taught you? And then that they're thinking about it, but not really understanding, from the point of view that we're coming from right now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
All right.
We'll see what happens.